You have a program called Manhood Training.
Mm-hmm.
What's your definition of man?
My definition of man, I would say, well, first I would say that I think historically we've defined manhood by what it's not more than what it is. So that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing, every definition we have of manhood is relative to other people or other things, right? So I would say I agree with that statement, and then, but I would twist it, I would change it, alter it a little bit, and saying we usually define how much of a man, or if you're a man, by like whose ass you can kick, or I get more women than X, Y, and Z, or I have more money than X, Y, and Z, right? It's always in relation to what somebody else is or isn't. Whereas I think what it should be is more affirming in just what you are on its own, right?
Okay.
Unrelated to what anybody else is doing or not doing. Like, to me, I'm a man because I'm self-defined, God-defined, and I have a set of principles and things that I abide by that I don't let other people alter or determine. We're social beings. Everything we do is going to have some impact by other people.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm confident enough in what I believe in, but also open to learning and continuing that journey.
These kind of relationships that get disturbed when we don't take the time to know what it is to sing, to know how to get close to the mic again, or to get something. Singing doesn't make it happen, or maybe
The man everybody is listening to is a son, is a community leader. He is a mentor. He is a Hampton University.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Pirates.
Every time I know, I always got to throw that in. God-fearing man.
God loving and respecting, and I like that better than God fearing.
I got you.
Yeah.
God loving and respecting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And just a good dude. You got any kids? I haven't asked you that yet.
No, I don't have kids.
So I was gonna say father. I feel like everybody got a lot of hats, man.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so I like to honor all of the ones that I am at least aware of. Hamani Wilson.
Yes, sir.
This brother came to my attention through my beautiful wife. She went about a year ago to an event that you were there, like a capoeira, maybe. Yeah, you had brought the kids there. I hate saying kids. I feel like it's so the young people, the young humans to the event. And I remember her coming back home and was like, "You got to look this dude up. Like this program that he's got going on is amazing." I was like, "What is his name? Who is he?" And I went online and started looking, and I saw and this was a year ago, I think September. Okay. As I was going through and looking. And I stuck a pin in it, and I was looking, and I was saying, okay, brother's doing some awesome work. I didn't know what you looked like, because like it ain't like you all up in the videos. You ain't the Diddy of manhood training, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing your thing, and a video was posted about, I think you guys took a trip over to Africa, somewhere in Africa. Ghana, and I was like, man, this is a power. I was like, it's time for me to tap back in with this brother. And we were able to make it work, man, which is beautiful. You're really, like a new term people use now, talking about being outside. I'm outside. Who's outside? Everybody like,
yeah, outside.
You outside, bro.
Outside, yeah.
You outside for these kids, for these babies, for for God's kingdom, I feel like, man, like you really connecting and doing some beautiful things, man. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity to highlight, to acknowledge the work that you're doing, add any level of visibility that I can.
Absolutely.
To the work that you're doing, and maybe, you know, encourage and motivate someone else to start something or come, you know, support what it is that you're doing.
Absolutely.
So let me read something real quick about the it's founded in 1980. The Manhood Training Rites of Passage process is designed to nurture, develop, and empower the spirit, mind, and body of young men of the African diaspora. It is also designed to prepare our young men to assume responsibility as tomorrow's husbands, fathers, leaders, warriors, role models, entrepreneurs, and mentors. The objective is to prepare our young men for the challenges to come both internally and externally. It is our mission to guide, love, equip, and train our young men to carry the torch and continue a legacy for future generations.
That's what it's about.
One of the things I heard you say in one of the brothers was saying as a mantra was, I keep God first in my life. I study to know myself. I think for myself analytically and critically. I always see the pathway in knowledge and wisdom. I respect everyone, especially my parents, family, and community. I respect and protect women and children locally and globally.
That's it. That's a pledge that was written by one of my mentors, in CeeLo Ure. He passed away, I guess about 3 or 4 years ago now. But he was one of the people that was my mentor with learning how to be a mentor. And so the first thing you read was our mission statement. And that a lot of time went into that, creating that with the guys the other barbers in Manhood Training. We spent hours literally coming up with that mission statement. Just because it's important, right? It defines, sets the tone for everything you do. And you can always come back to that as to be like, why are we here again? You know, to remember, you know, what you're doing and what you're here for.
How many kids are in your program?
So we actually just finished a cycle. So we've been going in 2-year cycles. I would say it's a qualitative process.
Okay.
Right? Where you're spending time getting to know the youth, getting to know them personally, and then allowing them to know each other collectively. So think of it as like a cohort or a pledge line, right? Like I'm class, or a school class. I'm class of 2023 of Manhood Training. So we just had about 8 young men go through the process. We took them to Charleston, South Carolina, for their final crossover. I feel like I should explain what Rites is overall real quick.
Please.
So you have mentoring, which is, I would say, more individual focused, right? Teaching somebody how to be their best self. And then you have rites of passage, which is also mentoring, but it's different in that it's about reaching a new phase of life. And I would say there's a spiritual aspect to rites of passage that may or may not be in mentoring. And then there's a community aspect in rites of passage. Whereas like now you are an accepted member of our community. So now you have a responsibility to be this for our community, to be a productive and positive member of our community, right? We acknowledge your growth. And so from that perspective, it's not just your family, right? It's your teachers, it's the members of your congregation. They're coming to celebrate your transition from, in this case, what you would consider a boy to a young man, for example. And so rites of passage, you hear of it in other traditions, quinceañera in Latin tradition, or a mitzvah in Jewish tradition. But what people don't know is that there's an African traditions, there are African traditions, right, throughout the continent that are similar rites of passage, coming of age ceremonies. My mentor I just spoke about, name is CeeLo, he would always point to Roots, the movie, and how there was the part in the beginning of the movie where they took the young men, they kind of kidnapped them symbolically, right, and took them away from their house. And then these were the warriors, the men in the community, and they took them out in the bush and the wilderness, if you will, to teach them how to be men, to teach them how to build their own home, to teach them how to take care of their own home, to teach them, what it meant to be productive member of their community, to teach them who they are, things like that. So that was a artistic depiction, right, of what has happened for hundreds, maybe thousands of years all over the continent. There are still traditions in Africa that still operate that way. You know what I mean? So rites of passage here at Union Temple was an attempt to replicate that level of intention when it comes to like preparing the youth for being a part of the community and letting them know that something for you is different now, right? There's an expectation that you operate differently now that you've gone through this process. We look at you differently now.
Now, the fivefold purpose of crossover that you guys have is spiritual development, teamwork, faith, love, and respect for authority. Are those kind of like the pillars, or that you have built into the rights that the young men have to demonstrate to get to the other side?
Yeah, those are things they have to demonstrate. I would say the three main aspects of development for them are physical, spiritual, and mental development.
Okay.
And so physical development being how you treat your body, what you eat, being physically active, things of that sort. And then the mental aspect being, being emotionally intelligent, being self-aware, being a critical thinker, being intelligent, studying, things of that sort, reading. And then the spiritual aspect would be developing a personal relationship with God, but also with others, right? Because that's how we, in essence, relate to others, teaching them the divine that resides within them, right? And the divine that resides within all of us. But to start to recognize the divine in themselves first, and then using that as an aspect to connect with their fellow man, fellow woman, to see the God in them also.
One of the things I like about the process, I feel, is that it's putting attention on the children or the young people doing something specifically. Like I feel like sometimes we're so concerned with trying to include everybody and everybody's feelings and sensibilities that we're afraid at times to tell somebody like, no, you have a responsibility to show up in this specific way.
Yeah.
How you do all of that you can express yourself and whoever the I is in that. If you want to show up with blue pants, if you want to show up with pink pants, whatever it is, but you got to show up to this space because you have a responsibility and we are depending on you. And it's instilling in the young men that, oh, this isn't, as a community, you, as a member of a community, you have a responsibility to show up in a specific way.
Yeah.
Even if you don't necessarily know what they are, and here are some tenets that you can use to reflect how you show up. Because it's, and I think some of us as young men want that, even if the frameworks can't necessarily assign it to them, whether the father's not present or if it's the mom not really, you know, knowing how, whatever. I think there's a longing for us a lot of times to understand that we matter, and to not show up is not acceptable. If you want this moniker of man, like, yeah, you are man because you exist and you're breathing, but there's a function that comes along with that role that we as a community are depending on you to be.
Yeah.
And you're demonstrating that, and it builds confidence. And I mean, it's the ramifications, or the being able to do that just shows up in so many positive ways.
Yeah, I think what you spoke about is right on point, in that there are a lot of young men who want the responsibility to be able to say that I am worthy of love, I'm worthy of attention, I'm worthy of, especially those that have that void, like you mentioned, of not having a father in the home, or not having somebody that they feel like is just has their back or in their corner. And so I think for this particular process, there's a balance to be achieved with that, though. I feel like in defining manhood, traditionally it's lacked nuance, right? Or it's lacked
Agreed.
discernment to be able to say that this is the kind of man I am, right? It was always like, you don't I don't know, you don't know how to fix
Change
a chair.
your alternator.
Yeah, you don't know how to build a chair. Like, you ain't no man. Like,
Oh, you can't build your grandma, you can't build your wife a house like your granddaddy did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were these structured things in place where it's like, you have to do this to be seen as a man. And I think that evolved into, like I said before, you have to not be this, or you can't be a punk, or people would tell you, I think a lot of people would define that they're a man based on what they're not these days, as opposed to what they are and what they are doing.
But your tenets, I think, kind of cut through that, and I guess set the stage for a young man. Expressing is one thing, right? And I think a lot of times we're real focused on expression. Like, how do you want to express? What are you? That's different than an expression.
Right.
Your expression can coincide with who you are, but it doesn't necessarily always have to, in the same way that God's love isn't always reflected in things that we can see. But at the end of the day, it's God's love.
And that's what's missing with defining your manhood by what you're not, right? Because there's no being in there. There's no affirming of like who and what you are. You just telling me you're not a punk, you're not a snitch, you're not a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're not really affirming who and what you are. And so in this process, for us, that starts with the divine inside, right? That I'm first created by God, right? I'm first a divine being living a human experience, right? As opposed to being somebody that is able to conquer others or to, get other women, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Completely dependent on what you're able to do to or for other people.
Do you find it hard to, so let me take a step back. A big charter, I feel, for men now, especially the older men, is to expand the concept of what this manhood and masculinity stuff is. It has just been way too narrow.
Yeah.
And it's been, let me take a step back. And we suffer the most because of how narrow
Bro.
our concept of this is.
Bro, patriarchy is more damaging to men than men realize it is. Obviously, has been damaging to women and, you know, other populations and things like that. But I don't think men realize how damaging it's been to us in a lot of ways. I would just say, based purely on the fact that I think men get tired of the constraints that patriarchy put on them, but they don't have the words for it always, right?
That's a good point.
So you hear a lot of times, you'll hear dads that say they just feel like a wallet, right? Or you'll hear family men say they just, because of they defined their status as a man based on protecting and providing, which has its place, right?
Yeah.
But when you solely attach your value to what you have and what you could do for others, right? What happens when you, I don't know, you have some medical condition, right? And you can't be there to physically protect somebody. A lot of men don't know how to handle that, right? Because it's like, I failed.
Yeah.
You know? I can't protect her anymore. Or what happens when you get hurt on the job and you can't earn no more?
Yeah.
I failed. I
Yeah.
can't feed my family anymore. And so that lack of depth and nuance is damaging for us during those times where we're not our strongest. Where it's like, I'm supposed to be my strongest all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's not even real.
It's not realistic. It's not realistic. So it's not forgiving. It doesn't allow you to be human and have human emotions. And when you can't have that, I think, in my opinion, is where we overcorrect by inserting manhood into stuff. And I think that's why a lot of men beat on their women and stuff like that, or are overly narcissistic and toxic and things like that, because they feel like they have to push through that deficiency and force the manhood into the situation.
That's what I feel makes your job tough. Mm-hmm. Is because you're taking these principles and this rites of passage, and you're superimposing that over the kids' existence of dealing with all of this other stuff that in a lot of ways is counter to it.
Yeah.
Does it feel futile at times? Do you get frustrated?
I would say, wait, say that one more time. Frustrated with what exactly? So I want to make sure I understand.
Superimposing the right. So the rites of passage is a way, so you've got spiritual development, physical development,
Mental development.
mental development. You've got these three things, right? All of that is the foundation. And out of that, a lot of these other things can be born.
Yeah.
But the way society teaches manhood and masculinity is through those 3 B's that the brother was talking about.
Right.
The billfold, the ball field, and the bedroom. So with spiritual, mental, and physical development and love and the tenets and the rites of passage, that's the counter to that, I feel. Because you can expand on anything when you're building from spiritual development, spiritual, mental, and physical. But that's not what the manhood is for today.
Right.
So you're coming in and you're talking to this 11-year-old and saying, hey, there's this new way of trying to, think about what it means to be a man and rites of passage. Yeah, you're thinking about spiritual development, mental development, so that when you do meet a woman who you want to marry or do whatever with, that you've done the work to show up in the best way that you can.
Right.
Society gonna tell you, just go get the girl. You're basically saying, nah, there's work you gotta do to even put yourself in a position to feel like you are entitled to that. That's what I'm saying is what I feel like can be frustrating at times, especially if you're talking to kids who don't necessarily have the home support to reinforce some of the things that you're talking about. It's almost like it's counter.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm all over the place with my thought, but
No, I get what you're saying. I think that I would flip it on his head and say that it is more difficult for all young men to have to fit into the constrained environment of the 3 Bs than it is for finding out how to connect with someone mentally, physically, or spiritually. And so I'll give you an example about what I mean. We have young men who don't really play sports, right? And so for them, there's already an inadequacy developed. Because they I don't really like football or basketball. You know what I mean? I like to. And the funny that you mentioned that now is because I think that it's much more acceptable now to have interests outside of sports. Yeah. More kids are into anime. More kids are into, gaming, doing TikTok dances, So I would even argue that the people who are clinging to those 3 Bs as definition of manhood, they're the ones that are getting frustrated. Because to them, manhood and masculinity is being assaulted and under attack. I got you. Okay. I see what you mean. Right? Okay. But for a lot of these kids, a lot of these youth, is more liberating to be like, I could just go make content on YouTube, or I could go edit videos, or you know what I mean? Like the definition of what you can be for them, right, is just for them, they just doing what they want to do anyway. That's just what I like to do. But what if they're doing that for the B? But what if they creating content for the bedroom and for the billfold? It's possible. I mean, it's possible. I think that there's always going to be. I think what's interesting is how these traditional ideas of manhood are going to, or are not going to, sustain as these different avenues come into play, right? And so, do you see that with the kids now? Yeah, I think you see the one aspect I could say that is just passed down effortlessly, right? I would say that all men are conditioned to be homophobic. Really? Yeah. I would say that because the worst thing you can do is be a punk or a sissy, right? And I'm saying that that's the G-rated version. Right. And so from an early age, there's a culture of like, you know, I ain't no bitch, or, you know, I ain't gay, oh, that's gay, or, you know what I mean? So I don't think that they're all conditioned to hate people that are gay, right? But conditioned to disassociate themselves from anything that could be remotely close to gay.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that I have a room full of kids and they like will beat up a gay kid. Or
No, I
like
got
that.
you. Yeah. I got you.
But, you know, they are scared to eat bananas because they know that it's going to be a joke in the room. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And they're scared to wear certain things, or, you know what I mean?
And that is still being passed down.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. I think there is in some spaces, there's a lighthearted nature to like joking about it. Like, oh man, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like pause, or like, you know, I don't know, some.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like, so that exists, but there's also, I would say, other side to it. There's like still there that they're just, it's an opportunity for unlearning or for self-awareness, right? Where being able to have discernment and being like, you know, the pause jokes are the pause jokes or whatever, but teaching them the same time that, you know, somebody in here may be struggling with their expression of sexuality, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So just be mindful of that, you know what I mean? As we're having our regular discussions or discourse or things like that.
So break down the program for me, man, or the rites. Is it broken down in like specific functions or things that the young men do to get to that after that 2-year mark? What does it consist of?
So first, there has to be a level of commitment, I would say, and so that part can be challenging at times because, you know, they have sporting leagues, they have school, they have things like that. So when we have our orientations, things like, we let parents know, we let the youth know, like, this process is not going to be for everybody in terms of, and the reason it has to be like that is the knowledge is progressive, right? So one of the first things we do when we meet with the young men, the first time we meet them, we have them do a vision board. And the reason we do that is to teach them about the power of affirmation, about the power of, you know, envisioning who and what you're going to be, right? And then the next level of that, and the first thing we teach them is that they are divine, as in addition to all of the other stuff they want to be, right? Typically when they start a vision board, it's all material stuff, which is cool. You know, cars, watches. I want to have, you know, they might have a cutout of Rihanna, somebody look like Rihanna. You know what I mean? Like, it's all status symbol kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But then we kind of, also as a progression on that, right? We're like, okay, so find things at a vision board. For the next iteration of your vision board, find stuff that's intangible, right? So now we teach them what intangible means. And so now they start to associate, you know, what are the qualities, right? What is my life going to look like outside of what I'm driving or what I'm wearing or what I'm making or what sport I'm playing? But like, what do I want my family to be like? Or what do I want my, you know, character to be like? What do I want people to say about me, you know, when that day comes, or, you know, what type of person I was? So it's progressive knowledge. Everything we do is building, like you said, on those 3 pillars. So it really makes it important for them to be present for that, you know, and that way we can, like I said, it's a qualitative process, so we can kind of track their growth and get to see the growth in them personally, but also collectively as a group, and how they're doing and what they're responding to, things of that sort.
Do the kids have, how do you pick the children, the young people?
It's an application process. And that most of the time is steeped in basically just, getting people who are serious about being a part of it. So that it gives you have something that you need to do, right? Because that's the point of all of this. We're teaching them that in order for you to cross over into the next phase of your development, there are things you have to do. Right? So we start with that. Like, you have to do an interview. You have to fill out an application, and you have to pay small dues or whatever. It's like $100 a year or whatever. And that is to try to attract people who really see the value and really want to do it. As opposed to people who just think it sounds nice, or are just looking for something for their kid to be occupied with for a few hours, on the weekend. And so I would say the application, and then the commitment, and the communication, honestly. And that's for everybody, like the young men, the parents, the barbers, the mentors, really just having check-ins. We encourage them to check in. We have an activity we call checking in. And so what we would do sometimes in the beginning would be to have them fill out, to write, what they're feeling or what they experienced at school on a piece of paper and put it in a bag. And it's anonymous, so nobody knows who submitted in the circle. And you get all kind of stuff that comes out in that environment. But then you get to a point, and this is why that commitment is important, is they're learning together, they're getting familiar with each other, where they get comfortable enough to they don't need the bag anymore. They just say, like, this is what I'm dealing with at school. Or this is what happened to me, with this person I'm dating or whatever. This is how I feel about it, or I'm not sure what to do. And so that puts them in an environment where they're able to be their authentic selves, which is what a lot of adult men struggle with, right? Speaking about their feelings, speaking about what is or isn't happening in their lives right now in an authentic way. So I think that is the next level of the next evolution of manhood that I think we are still trying to figure out, right? How to discern, how to be emotionally intelligent, self-aware, vulnerable, things like that.
How do you deal with that stuff?
Therapy.
So you do therapy?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one way. I would. Sometimes I write.
You consider yourself a vulnerable cat?
Yes and no. I would say being emboldened in my manhood, right? And what I determine why I feel like I'm a man is learning how to speak my truth and be okay with that, even if somebody else might perceive it away, whatever. So I would say outwardly facing in a public space, I'm not the most vulnerable. I've gotten more vulnerable as I've become more confident in just my own expression of my manhood. But I'm learning to be more vulnerable still, with my closest relationships.
Okay.
And I think that development is important, and I think it's something that's taking place with like my closest friend circle, my family, things like that. So I would say yes and no.
Because I know a lot of people, man, who grew up in the church, bro, and whose parents were preachers, big time, this and that and the third, and that voice about what you should be doing and how you should be doing it, and the family and legacy and blah, 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 like that stuff can be in your head. That voice can be so loud sometimes that you forget sometimes what your voice sounds like.
Yeah.
And people on the outside looking in aren't even really factoring that into like that individual's journey. They just looking at a bunch of superficial stuff that, I mean, it's important, it matters, but it's like at the end of the day, you know, one of the most manly things, I talked to my godson about this, one of the most manly things you can do, stand up and look somebody in the face and tell them who you are.
Yeah.
And deal with whatever come with that. Even if it's your mama, even if it's me, whoever it is, like you gotta get in real good practice of doing that and dealing with whatever comes. Cause just cause you do it, don't mean people gonna like it. Don't mean they should like it.
Right.
Cause they also get to be them. But like you were saying before, regardless of the ramifications, no matter what happens as a result, and that's difficult for people who come from families who are successful or in the limelight or have like this perceived legacy that they have or they feel responsible for maintaining in a specific way.
Yeah.
So salute to you, bro. Because I know, I mean, obviously you ain't got to get personal with it at all, but I understand.
Yeah. And I would say that there's been both pros and cons, I would say, because there were times where I may have a teacher who would say, I know your dad, you should know better, right? And so on one hand, I would suck, right? And be like, dang, I'm just laughing and joking like everybody else. I get singled out. But at the same time, sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes there was love behind that, right? So they was like, I'm letting you know I'm paying close attention to your development, right? Because I know, you know, about you know what I mean? And so there was pros and cons to it, I would say. But I think that's funny you asked me about that vulnerability, because I think having that level of attention definitely made me shrink for sure. As I was going through adolescence and things like that, I wanted to be away from the limelight. I knew that there were things that I could do that were more public facing, but I was like, I don't want to, you know, open myself up to that level of scrutiny or things like that. But to what you said a minute ago about standing up and declaring and affirming who you are, that's been our history, when you think about it, you know, as black men, right? Black men being bold enough to, even in the face of death, you know, the protests in Tennessee where Dr. King was killed for, you know, the I Am a Man protest, like, that's really the only thing you control, really, is yourself.
Yeah.
So when you lose agency over, you know, who you are and what you are, then what do you really have left? After that, you know what I mean? Because
we talk a lot about being a part of being grown. Like you'll hear somebody say, "I'm grown. I can do whatever I want to do." A lot of it is about doing, to the point that I think we were talking about earlier. But what we're doing, even though we're grown and we can do whatever it is that we want to do, we rarely do whatever it is that we want to do.
Right.
We only do a few specific things.
Yeah.
We don't do whatever we want to do.
Yeah.
We do specific things.
Yeah.
Ball field, bedroom, and billfold. And most of our actions are centered around trying to figure out how to do something within one of those three spheres. And I think, you know, part of acknowledging that we are part of a community and a culture, and you're being influenced by things that are outside of you that don't necessarily serve your best interest. So if you can do anything you want to do, why you think you want to be a rapper as a goal and not a scientist? Out of all the things you can do because you've grown, you want to be a rapper. You want to be a ball player. Like there are reasons why we're going after these, why we want to do these specific things, and then you come across somebody like Hamani who says, "Hey, look, do these other things," but there's no social incentive to do though, like to be a stand-up human being. Yeah, you'll get a few people in your circle will care, but you're not gonna get clout from your homeboys for not sleeping with a woman who wanted to sleep with you because you feel like she's not in the right place and you not in the right place. Ain't nobody gonna give you kudos for that.
Right.
You don't get no reward. You're gonna get a reward for going through with it, and then whatever happens from that happens from it. But
Yeah.
you know, the incentive structure is completely different, and that's one of the things I feel the spiritual element adds to it, is that like your rewards are coming from somewhere else. Yeah, you got these social pressures. We're, you know, social beings, but there's got to be something greater than that we have to focus on. And I feel like the reminder that spiritual connection is the real juice in the squeeze of what it is, of life and what it is that you got going on. You know, you get the chance to reflect the God that's in you when you treat your fellow man better.
Exactly.
You get to reflect that.
Right.
You know, you get to demonstrate your commitment to God when you forgive somebody who your first thought tells you not to forgive. You know, to put yourself in a position to understand where somebody else is coming from. Oh, you get to reflect God in you with that. Like that's your payment, like being able to reflect God. I ramble with some of the stuff sometimes, but.
And I think a lot of those things, a lot of those most philosophical things, we give them, right? And some of the young men are mature enough or wise enough, even at the age of 11, 12, 13, they'll go right there with you. You know what I mean? A lot of times it's us that think
But you can't go there.
the kids are not ready for certain conversations or whatever. But they'll meet you there a lot of times. Not all of them, but a lot of them are a lot wiser, they're a lot more intuitive thinkers than we give them credit for, honestly. And it's really just giving them the opportunity to feel okay expressing it.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, if it's not involving the 3 Bs or if it's not involving this socially accepted forms of masculinity or whatever, a lot of guys will shy away from those aspects of themselves because it doesn't fit into those rigid boxes. And then when you don't exercise those things, it's like muscles, right? When you don't use it, it can't develop.
Yeah, it can't.
So you have kids who 11, 12, 13 who are very wise, are very intuitive, are very empathetic, are very socially and self-aware, but they don't get to exercise that parts of themselves, right? And so you can't even really quantify the growth or the community development that we are missing because of those things are not being encouraged at young ages and young men.
And that can be.
So how many great thinkers never realize their potential, right? Because
of that.
They're not able to feel inspired or right. There's like you gotta rap or you gotta play ball or you gotta be lawyer or doctor, right? And especially in the Black community, we have a very specific list of acceptable,
very specific,
successful things you could do and be. And I don't know that other groups, identities have that same. They may. I don't know. I'm just speaking. I just don't know.
Do you is how do you feel we deal with like empathetic boys now? Like the brother. Like this is how I feel like I was. I could feel stuff around me. And I was tuned into my feelings in a way that I didn't feel like a lot of other people around me were.
Wow.
And I got criticized for that. Cause it's like, suck it up.
Yeah.
Don't do that shit around here. Better be a man, go do this, to that, and the third. So then you start, the feelings don't go away. They're still there. Now I have to either hide them, and when you hide anything, it turns into something else.
Right.
And so a lot of my empathic behavior showed up as sexual prowess, like physical aggression, violence in certain instances and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if you harken back to the little boy
Right.
who had these feelings, I just needed somebody responsible and connected and aware enough for me to be like, let me help this brother through how to process these and manage these emotions, as opposed to
I'm the same way, bro.
having me push it down.
I'm the same way. To somebody to be like, that's a gift.
Yes.
Instead of a burden, right? And so how does that gift translate into, your purpose or your reason for being here? But instead, what we often see is from an early age, and a lot of times it's people thinking they meaning well, right?
Yeah.
Like, stop
Yeah.
crying,
Yeah.
or like, stop whining, and it's like, it's a 6-year-old boy. What you?
Yeah, he's 6.
What you expect him to do? Like, it's going to come a time for him to, learn how to push through things, but he's 5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so not being able to express that even at that age, again, just like we just talked about, it doesn't develop, right? So as an adult, when he really wants to demonstrate his feelings, but because he hasn't matured that aspect of his thinking, he don't really know how to articulate it, right? And so now, not that I'm excusing it, but now he's, lashing out, right? He don't know, he doesn't have the words or the language to say, that doesn't make me feel good, or that the way you did that hurt me, or you know what I'm saying? But all he's developed is a way to, try to make other people feel the pain that he doesn't really know how to articulate. You know what I mean? Or things of that nature. So that's something that is very interesting. The only time guys, I think, are allowed to show emotion is when they maybe talk about their mom, or I'm trying to think of what else. Very, very limited set of circumstances.
Kids.
Yeah. And so we all learn the same devices. We all learn the same oppressive structures, or the oppressive devices, right? So I think a lot of times, sometimes you see in the podcast sphere now, I think you see even a lot of women, right, who are reinforcing some of this hyper-masculine, just like stuff, right? And so it's always going to be interesting. I think life is about balance, right? Do I think that people should be crying at every sunset? You know what I mean? Maybe not, but do I think you need to be able to empathetically connect with your folks or your family, or even the a stranger sometimes. You know what I mean? They'd be like, that's a human being right there that's going through that. You know what I mean?
This is why I feel, man, the feminine energy is important. Because I got most of my help managing that stuff from women.
That's what I was saying earlier.
Like a dude, not a single man helped me navigate how to interact from an empathetic standpoint with this stuff. Even some of the, even when certain women have been hard on me in certain instances. I think it would have been more helpful for me to have a man energy helping me navigate some of these emotional connections that I would have. I don't know if feminine is necessarily the right word to use for the opposite of like the masculine energy that I had. I just felt like there were multiple, like there was this much that I could process in an interaction, but I only knew how to express half of it. And this other half was like this big question mark, a gray area of just, I like women.
That mission statement you read, the first word, you said manhood training is designed to, what's that first word after that?
Nurture, I think. Did you say it? No,
Nurture.
Yeah.
Because when you think of rearing a child, whether it's a male or when it's a male, very rarely do we use the word nurture, right? Or very rarely do we feel that that's a responsibility as a male to nurture. But I believe that it is. One of the, I think, if you just think of the way that people are, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you're thinking about the boy's development? It's discipline. We associate discipline with rearing with young men. But when it comes to young women, it's much more of a nurturing, it's much more of a like caring. And I believe that young men need that same nurturing and caring, right? Because that's what's going to enable them to demonstrate that in their more developed relationships later in life.
So that space that I was just talking about, where I felt like I could process half of it and the other space, nurturing could have helped with that, is what I'm hearing you say.
It could have helped with it, or it might have been nurturing itself.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Or because I never felt nurtured as a kid, bro. And it's interesting that you use that word, but that's not a word I would ever use to describe my childhood.
And a lot of guys wouldn't, right? Even sometimes I've had friends who were raised by single mothers. And they, you know, it's hard on single mothers, right? They have to play so many roles, so many hats. But even some of them feel like maybe because their mother felt the need to be the disciplinarian too, right?
Yeah.
That maybe they didn't have as much nurturing.
Yeah.
You know, they couldn't have the good cop, bad cop thing with the parents or whatever. So maybe some of that was lost in that having to, and her having to make sure he was a strong young man, right? Maybe left out some of the nurturing. Who knows?
And a father, I was talking to my homeboy who was on here, Life, and he has 3 sons. And I remember asking him a question. We were talking, and I don't know what made me think of it. I was like, when is the last time you had a gentle moment with your sons? And I don't know and he looked, because it's, you know, even the word gentle isn't a word
Tightened
that,
up.
like, you like, hold on, man, you mean gentle? What's it? Like everything,
Tightened
and you
up.
like, you
Yeah.
feel like,
Tightened up.
and he was like, yeah, man, that word ain't a word we use a lot when we talking about men interacting with other men. And I don't think fathers are giving themselves permission either to be those things. Because a part of what, if we are empaths and we have a vocabulary, because to me, I think it's about intelligence and vocabulary. You have, it's not just enough to have one without the other. You really need both to communicate. In this language, and all this is real time, by the way, so I don't even know if it's true. But
Yeah.
it's just me, that space that I was describing, when you use the word nurturing, did make me feel like, or visualize that I could have captured a broader percentage of what I was feeling if I had that nurturing aspect. And I was raised by a single mom for the most part. My dad was around a little bit, but you know, to the point that you can't be everything. You know, you might lean more to the disciplinarian side, you know, because you just don't have the energy
I gotta keep them alive.
and that's more important than loving this little, you know what I'm saying?
Gotta keep them alive.
Keeping them alive. That's loving them. So it is important to remember that as men, we need to nurture other men.
Yeah.
Like,
Put it this way, I think that a lot of times, to the example I just made, there's a mentality that every little boy just needs to be punched in the chest, right? And he'll be all right. You know what I mean? Whereas that there's no nuance in that, right? There might be some young men who you punch in the chest or you say, get your shit together, and they be like, all right. You know what I mean? And they are better for it.
Yeah.
But there are some that you might have to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
And to tell them you love them, and to tell them that you care about them, and to tell them that, you know what I mean? Or it's all right to, you know, that you got rejected. Or, you know, your dad ain't here, but, you know, I love you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I care about you, even though your dad ain't here. You know what I mean? And so, for some people, that might get them to be their best self. That might get them to make sense of what they're going through and be like, you know what? It's gonna be cool. You know what I mean? So, traditionally, manhood has lacked that nuance of being
Very
like,
much so.
this is what you need. This is what you need. And, you know, y'all might need two different things, but that doesn't make even one of y'all less of a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I had to chastise you and I had to maybe love on you, you know what I mean? That doesn't make it any one or more or less of a man.
And that's where I think the expression things come in. Express however you express. But you are a man. Express however you want to express, but you are a man, and that man has a function. And some of it I feel is in contrast to the feminine energy or of a woman. Like it's like, how can you have a left if there is no right? Like that, a left just sitting there with no right is, I don't know what it is, but I just feel like it's probably something else.
I think women have, of all the things we're discussing about men and masculinity, we are so far behind women and their journeys with womanhood and femininity. And the reason I say that is because for men, this is new, right? Us having these conversations about like, well, what is manhood? Or is that enough or is that too much? But women have had to contemplate these things for decades. They've constantly had to reinvent what womanhood is. They've constantly had to be affirming and say, I can go get a bank loan. I can buy a house. I can get a career. I can make my own money. You know what I'm saying? They've constantly had to figure out what womanhood is over and over and over again. And I think for them, I think that's why they have a lot more comfortability in it just being different stuff, right? You have women who are like, I don't need to have kids to be a woman, you know what I mean? Or I don't need a husband to be a woman, or I don't need to cook, or, you know what I mean? I think they have a lot more liberated thinking when it comes to that than men do, because a lot of these conversations for us are newer because everything was just cookie cutter. It was just like already set in stone.
I agree. Mm-hmm. Like to a certain, to this point here, which mm-hmm. is, I feel like sometimes the women have been spending so much time talking about it that they've excluded the importance of the man and the importance of its contrast to the definition of the woman.
Okay.
It's like, okay, now we just don't even need a man now, especially if we're talking about the spiritual development.
Okay.
Because I do think it's probably the same for the women. So now you get to say, okay, you don't need a man to get along. Okay, let's talk about what these rites of passage even are from a woman's standpoint. Once you remove all of that kind of stuff, you still need something counter to that to really validate this thing of what it is. So, of course you can be a woman without being a mom, in the same way that you could be a father, a man, without being a father. But I feel like a lot of where the women's redefinition is coming into play is almost saying, I'm that even without men. And I think a part of our journey as men is trying to acknowledge that a significant part of the definition includes the complementary nature of the woman. Like that's also there as well. And the women's side, I say this sounds so ridiculous sometimes for some of it, but I think there's like, I don't need a man, because we're incentivized now to be at these ends of the spectrum with one another. And so much so to where we don't even have to cooperate even at a certain point. Here are my cutoffs, here are my cutoffs. Here's where I make this money, I need you to be whatever, and I need you to do this.
Yeah, so I guess I was speaking to, so I didn't particularly mean the population that feel like, we don't need men in society, whatever, that kind of, I wasn't necessarily speaking to that. But what I was speaking to is that they're more comfortable out of necessity, right?
I got you, okay.
Because they've had to raise boys by themselves. They're more comfortable leaning into, when they need to, channel the masculine parts. Because, right, both energies exist in the universe. So they've been more comfortable. It maybe not have been more comfortable, but they've had to by necessity. To lean into those masculine sides sometimes to keep us alive, right? To keep that single boy alive. Whereas I think if we want to advance as a community, collectively, it's going to require men to start to think about some of the same things. How do I access those understanding and caring sides of myself so that the community can advance? And I'll give you a perfect example. I'm gonna ask you in the form of a question. How does a man protect a woman from sexual assault?
I would have. You want me to try to like answer it?
Yeah, you can answer. Give me your opinion, or
By not committing a sexual act against a woman.
Okay. I would agree with that. Definitely by not being a rapist, for one. By not being a rapist, first of all, right? But I think that on the whole, we have this mentality of the protecting part being, I'm going to just go beat his ass after it happens.
I got you.
When it's already done. The damage is done already.
Yeah.
She's already had her personal space, safety violated.
Mm-hmm.
And now all you're doing is making yourself going to feel better by making him feel whatever you're making him feel. But I believe if you could tap into those caring and loving aspects, right? Where you, and just like women checking into their masculine side, it might not always be comfortable, but you might have to talk to your daughter or your goddaughter about sex. As much as it might make you cringe and squirm, you might have to talk to her about the people she's around and, you know what I'm saying, what the people are like that she is attracted to. You know what I mean?
It's hard. So
I'm just saying that protection comes before the offense, right? And so if you're unable to access the caring, loving, nurturing sides of yourself, to be able to have some insight, to give a damn about what is going on with them, their romantic lives, whatever, before it happens, you're removing yourself from the opportunity to protect them at all. Because maybe you could have told her something beforehand.
Yeah.
That she would have been like, I don't know, this thing, he a little too, you know what I mean? Maybe I need to just be careful with him, you know what I mean? Because he's demonstrating signs that maybe he's just here for one thing, or maybe he's just around for other motives. So the inability or the unwillingness to access those feminine, caring, nurturing sides or whatever is, in my opinion, holding us back collectively.
I got you.
From being able to make that, to really be protectors, right? To really make the women feel like we got their back and we willing to sit and listen to them and talk to them and connect with them on that level.
Have you heard about the woman, man, that got hit in the head with the brick?
I think I did hear about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know all the details.
Yeah.
But apparently there was this woman, for people who don't know, who got hit in the head with a brick. She was having a conversation with a dude. Apparently she was being disrespectful to the guy, saying some wild stuff or whatever the case may be. And the guy threatened to pick up a brick and hit her if she kept talking crazy. So the girl kept talking crazy. Dude hits her with a brick. Then she starts complaining about how none of the other men stepped up for her and stepped in. And a lot of my homeboys, and I've been hearing a lot of conversations about how we put ourselves, how we as men should be putting ourselves in positions to defend women no matter what, even if the woman is wrong. And so should we be extending ourselves and our safety to include women who might not be behaving in the best way or to deserve it? And then you start talking about, do all women deserve protection when this woman out here is smacking dudes or getting physical and talking crazy and this kind of stuff? What are your thoughts about that?
Do all women deserve protection, or the brick part?
Well, hold on. However you want to answer, bro.
I believe everybody deserves protection. I believe everybody deserves to be safe. Now, somebody being deserving is a slightly different conversation of like, should you insert yourself and subject yourself to potential harm? And I think that's just going to be a case by case scenario. I think the world we live in now with cameras and stuff and all of that it has made things like this bigger than life, right? Where we're all talking about it, having think pieces and stuff like that. I could say that I know that's somebody's daughter, sister, whatever. And would I like other guys to step in that situation that I don't know? Hell yeah. And that's it. We're empathetic. That's my empathetic mind, though, right? But on the other hand, there's also this aspect of, do you just want to subject yourself to having harm come to yourself or the other guy? Because we know that when a physical altercation starts, you don't know where it's going to end.
Never.
You know what I mean? Somebody could end up losing their life at the end of that struggle. You know what I mean? And so I think this is why I gave the example that I gave, where we look at protection through a strictly relative lens, whereas like, as if that's the only way to protect, right? I think and I believe that the first thing we need to do, just like not being a rapist, right, is to not be perpetrators of that kind of violence. And to let other brothers know, other guys, that that's unacceptable. I tell the young men I mentor all of the time, I'm like, remove yourself from the situation because you're going to lose if you stay.
Yeah.
You either going to get your head beat in by her and look crazy and feel crazy, or you going to harm her and you're going to lose in both scenarios. You're going to lose. So I think that we need to be louder as men on the, like, you don't need to put your hands on her to get your point across, right? You don't need to put your hands on her to have whatever that guy that picked up a brick because he felt disrespected. He couldn't handle it. Ultimately, right? Somebody else might have had a camera around. He like, I look like a punk. I look like a bitch right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so just like we mentioned earlier, to salvage that feeling, to him, risking whatever he was risking by hitting her with a brick was better than that little boy of being embarrassed and being everybody pointing their fingers and laughing at him. You know what I mean? And so that's because, in my opinion, we're not developing the range of emotions early on. Like, right? That's straight from his childhood. Somebody was like, oh, you gotta go see so-and-so because you ain't know, you know what I mean?
But so even, that's definitely a big piece of it. Mm-hmm. But I think we also have to add the element of the perceived value of the black woman in that space too. Mm-hmm. Like, why did the brothers standing around feel like it was okay to watch that? A couple of the dudes even offered their response to why they didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And some of them were along the lines of like, she's always starting stuff. She was calling for this. She wasn't doing anything to, make it better. She was actually making it worse. Like this is what they're saying she's doing to contribute to what happened. And it's And I feel like it's a value perception thing to a degree. Like all of them were like, oh, okay, well I'm used to seeing women having a certain perceived value in spaces.
Yeah.
And if she's conducting herself in a manner that has low value from my perspective, then whatever happens to her is deserved. So it's not like I'm coming to the table as looking at a black woman saying, I don't give a fuck what she do. We don't do this to women, period. Because the value's already as high as it can be. Yeah. She just might not see herself or might not be conducting herself in a manner. Absolutely. But I don't perceive that when I look at the black woman. So then I get to base it on her behavior. You see what I'm saying? And we as black men, I feel, have a responsibility to remind our women in our community who they are and of their value. And sometimes I feel like that means jumping out the window especially for somebody who you don't necessarily think deserves it on the surface. Ain't this what Jesus been doing? Ain't this what all of the folks been doing the whole time? I don't want to be that dude, by the way, that's jumping out for a woman who's acting like that. I don't want to be that guy. But if the universe aligns me to that parking lot that night when that happened, then that's what I feel like my duty is at that moment in time. Do I fault other guys for not? But I know, kinda. But I do recognize that the only reason why they are allowing that to happen is because of what they feel that woman's perceived value is.
Yeah, like Malcolm X said, the most disrespected person in America is a black woman, right? And so that messaging and conditioning we've all received one way or another. And I feel like what you just said, right, is just saying that I don't care what she's done, right? She don't deserve that.
She don't deserve that.
That is what I was saying, that we need to be heavy on that messaging proactively, right? And not reactively. You have to teach young men not to be rapists, right? You have to teach them that they need to carry themselves in a certain way, that if it looks like it could be perceived that way, then you need to just back up. You know what I mean? We need to teach them that when the police show up, their bias is going to assume that you are the perpetrator, that you are the guilty party.
Yeah, that's how it's set up.
You know what I'm saying? So when you're teaching them, actively teaching them that before the situation comes up, the hope is that in that situation, you know, they're able to better respond to that situation. So what I'm saying is, yes, it's good to teach black women what their value are, but it's equally or more important to teach black men what their value are, and that's crazy that he did that. You know what I'm saying?
Who's responsible? Who do you feel is responsible? The black woman not knowing, or the black man not acknowledging?
I don't think they stand on their own. I think they probably overlap at some point, for sure. I think that people may not know because they may not have been treated that way. Like we don't know what her rearing or her raise or her situation background is like, or any person, but black woman specifically, right? So they may come from a situation where they were not valued, where they were not treated like they have value. And so I don't know that I can blame a person for not knowing they have value if no one's ever told them they have value, or they've never been treated as if they have value. Because society writ large, right, has conditions us that black women have no value.
Do you think we will be able to communicate that with sexy reds running around? How can we walk and chew gum at the same time as it relates to that kind of respect? How can we communicate and tell women that they are everything?
Mm-hmm. I can say that Sexy Red and whoever, they have a right to express themselves the way they want to. As long as they understand the perception that people are going to have or whatever. And if they're okay with that, then cool. Like, that's your life. But
there we go. There we go. I'm ready. I'm ready.
But the but is coming for, this might not be headed where you think it's going.
Oh, shit. Okay. All right. My bad. Go ahead.
The but is coming from, even if she is popping ass and, rapping about booty hole brown, that still don't mean that she should be assaulted or hit with a brick or, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't give you license to do things to her that she hasn't consented to.
True.
Right? But if she is telling you to call her booty hole brown and she's okay with you calling her that, then that's a different story. But she's not rapping about, hit me with a brick and sexually assault me. You know what I'm saying?
But she is okay. This is why our music, it's really hard to talk about value, to talk about black people, young people, men, women, without talking about the music.
Yeah.
Because it's so reflective and connected to everything. It's one of the things we did not understand, bro, in the 80s, in the early 80s, in the mid 80s, and the 90s, is what the long-term ramifications of that type of music was going to have on our culture. It was good, it was expressive, it started out at this one thing. How long did we think that we were gonna talk about? How long did we think we were going to subjugate women? Talk about how they're nothing. Talk about how we use them, objectify them, how money's over everything, and how they're only good for one thing.
Yeah.
How long did we think we were going to do that without that coming around full circle? So we talk about what this women's value is. It's reflected. We're reflecting their value based on how we treat them and the images we propagate and the ways that we even verbalize we treat them. We're indirectly telling them about their value in the same way that we're indirectly telling us about our value when we talk about how we can smoke somebody and kill them or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
That comes back around at some point in time.
Yeah.
So it's the perceived value of black women globally and even within our own community can only be as high as we allow our images of them to be expressed and how we treat them. I don't think it can go any higher than that. because the whole transaction is performance based to a certain degree, and that's all we've been telling women that they're good for. You know what I'm saying? So you're only going to be good for this one thing, sans all the other stuff, right? So I don't know how women can hold a high value in a culture that presents them in the way that we do, even if it's just entertainment. I don't know how we do both. In the same way that I don't know how we can talk about loving men and valuing Black life when we talking about how much we smoke them at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And we glorify that. I don't know how they seem counter to each other. That's the only reason why I don't think her being in a position is going to help, because like she should be protected, but at the same time, that's the behavior that's being propagated about how Black women are.
Well, I think that I think what do you choose to align with, right? So I'm gonna bring it back to the young men in manhood training. So we tell them, like, we listen to 21 Savage. You know what I'm saying? That don't mean I'm sliding with the ops, you know? You know what I'm saying? I don't mean I'm sliding on the ops. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm like, you know the difference between entertainment and real life. You know what I mean? Like, I know women who are lawyers and stuff that, you know, we went through college and they was backing that ass up to juvenile, and they like Sexy Red now, you know what I mean? Are able to differentiate between entertainment and not entertainment. Now, it's up to the artists and what they pushing out, and us who are rearing these kids for them to know that what they pushing out, some people are like, I'm trying to be like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's your thing to deal with. All I could do is, if I am mentoring a young lady, right, to be like, I can only point her to other examples of Black women. You know what I mean? There's Gabrielle Union, there's Erykah Badu, there's Michelle Obama. There's a spectrum of womanhood that Black women are putting out. You know what I mean? That, you know, just like men, you will have to decide and define who you are and how you want to be viewed, but understand that how you present yourself is going to, it may or may not attract what you want, right? So, for example, me opening up about my struggles with mental health or anxiety or things like that, somebody might hear that and be like, that nigga's a sucker. You know what I mean? Like, he's soft.
Yeah.
But he's supposed to be able to just handle his.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So my choice to share that opens me up to somebody's perception of like whatever they want to turn it into. Same way with Sexy Red. She wants to feel liberated, that she can talk and rap about the same things that men rap about, right? Just because I'm a woman, I could be just as whatever on the radio as dudes could be. But if I'm into a younger lady, I'm like, just be mindful that if that's what you're pushing out, there are going to be guys who can't make that distinction, right? And they are going to see you as like, oh, she easy, like you. That's light. Go. That's for her right now. She anything. She easy. You know what I mean? That don't mean it's true.
Yeah, it don't mean it's true.
But I'm just saying that is more than likely, I would say, the perception that a lot of guys are going to have, especially if they already, like you said, assign a lower value to women or value the woman only connected to what they could do for you sexually, right? That's probably, you could be in a nun outfit and some of them might still be like, oh yeah, I'm about to try to,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You could be fully clothed and dressed like a nun and some of them might still be like, Yeah, that's what you mean. That's what your value is to this space. You know what I mean? So
as much as that guy hit that woman with that brick, and as much as the woman did what she did, I'm always bothered by the people who film. More so, or the people who just stand by and watch. Those are the people that I feel like my gaze always gravitates towards. And it reminds you, it reminds me that there's an ass for every seat. Like there's something out there that's going to gravitate to you if there are enough eyes on you. And that's the struggle that I feel we have in these scenarios, because there has to be something that gives the thing value.
yeah,
That the people, observers, then say is valuable. It's like with Ferrari or whatever. I think I was watching something on Ferrari. They don't let people mod their cars or change. There's something that they have going on with their cars to where they're real strict about who can do certain things and make modifications to their cars. And if they end up doing something wild to one of the cars or mods it out or goes against their design language for what they did with that car, they won't sell them a car no more. No matter how much money they have. 'Cause they're like, this is what we got. This is what this means. This is why we have it set up for this. So they protect that
yeah,
in the ways that they feel that they know how to protect it. They're setting a standard for what this is. And that's the part that I feel we struggle with as Black, is the standard of value and how we perceive it, not based on what the person is doing or not doing. They're a human being,
Right.
and they deserve protection because they are that.
right.
Not based on what they do.
Intrinsic value versus instrumental value.
There you go. There you go.
Whereas your value hasn't changed. My perception of how valuable you are is what ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah.
But that's why we start with, in Manhood Training, we start with the self. You determine, Kwanzaa principle, Kuji Chocolate is self-determination, right? You determine who you are and what you are. God determined first who you are and what you are. I think Marcus Garvey had a quote that God and nature first made us what we are. And then out of that creative genius, we determine who and what we want to be. So it's like, I am divine first. I am intrinsically valuable because I'm here, because I exist. I am a being. I am, right? That affirmation alone is powerful. I am. And that's how all this connects, right? Because most of the definitions of masculinity are related to your position against something else, or your proximity to something else, or what you can do or be to someone else, right? That needs to be more emphasized with the self, with the divine first, like I am, you know? Like even if my job is taken away, or if my women is taken away, or if my car is taken away, then what am I? You know what I mean? That unchanging intrinsic value that you still, your true self, you still what God created you to be.
I'm glad, man, you are a voice for these young boys at the age that you are, at the age that they are. When you trying to answer those kind of questions in your 30s and 40s and 50, it look way different.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's harder. Not to say it's impossible, but it's just a different endeavor, man. You got so much more time to unfold when the right person is asking you that kind of question at 11, 12, 13, 14. You know, it's because it's a seed that just gets to grow into whatever God lays before you to have an experience of, and then water that seed. It's a beautiful role to play, man, and to move with that level of intention and love for these young people, man. I'm glad you're out there doing the work, bro.
I appreciate it. It's hard work.
I know
It's
a lot
tough.
of your stuff is donation based and everything, man. How can folks tap into what you're doing? What you need? You need resources. You need labor. What kind of work? What can we do to help?
I would say definitely volunteers is always a help. Donations definitely go a long way. We are at Manhood Training Inc. on Facebook, Instagram, X now I guess it's called. But I would say what we need is people who are, I would say, have something to contribute. I think that we all have gifts. We all have purpose. I think we all have time, even if it's just a little bit of time to contribute. Whether you help with manhood training specifically or not, I think that the lesson that the ancestors have taught me personally is that to just, cast down, put your intention where you are. Start where you are, on your square, Look around you and figure out what is in my part, right? And this larger, I would say, dynamic of community advancement, right? It has many different facets, many different lanes. This was an avenue I chose to pursue in this time and space, mentoring youth. There are people who are protesting. There are people who are making laws, writing laws. There are people who are, fighting at every avenue. What you're doing here, pushing out that message, the media, the power that the media has. I would say specifically, we need people who are willing to be proactive and bring dedicated energy to advancement. They're willing to help us develop these young men, willing to think outside the box about how we do that. Right now, we're in a space where we are contemplating shifting our model to be more far-reaching and expanding to reach more youth, and thinking about how we can do that while maintaining that qualitative aspect, where you're getting to know the youth, and getting to know them, like who they are and what they're about. So all of these things are challenging, right? Mm-hmm. But nothing's new. I think I'm a strong proponent of history, studying history, what our ancestors did before us, and thinking about how and what they did can be magnified or illuminated or built upon. So right now, for example, we're thinking about how we can make the journey back to Ghana, back to Africa, right? The prices has exponentially.
Yeah, they dumb now.
Yeah, when we went in 2019, it was probably a third of the cost that it was to go there this year, just for a plane ticket. And so, but things happen the way they're supposed to, right? So I mentioned earlier, we took this most recent group to South Carolina, and that was a full circle moment. Because on the side, across the water in Ghana, there's a door of no return, which was the final pass through that the Africans, enslaved Africans, would go through before they journeyed to America. And in South Carolina, I didn't know this until this summer when we were planning the trip, but there's a range. Some people say 4 and 10, and I've seen the numbers high as 7 and 10. 7 4 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 Africans that were brought to America came in through the Charleston, South Carolina port.
Really?
So I've seen a number as low as 4 in 10, which is still a huge number.
It's a lot,
40% or 70%, right? And so the likelihood is that after going through that door of no return, there's a strong possibility that they touched down on the Charleston shores, right? So it was kind of a full circle moment to get the other side of that equation. And I want to talk about this too before I get too far off track. We definitely emphasize a heavy part of what we do is African history, African American history. I feel like African history is an African American history.
Agreed.
But there's a lot of people who are like, I'm tired of slavery. Why are we always talking about slavery? And I think that they take issue sometimes with the way that we, I guess I would say, emphasize that in the historical aspects of when we learn history. But I would say that what better story is it, right? To talk about the first black millionaires, right? And the fact that sometimes they were slaves or their parents were slaves.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make the story that much more powerful? You know what I mean?
For sure.
That they literally did not own their own body. And then 50, 60, 70 years later, they had valuations of $1 million. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to focus on these other aspects of entrepreneurship, of triumph and things like that. Absolutely. But to tell that story without the context of where they started from, it does it a disservice, right?
Yeah.
We talk about it all the time, how these .com billionaires, like, I don't know, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, how their parents were already wealthy. So we're like, oh man, like, you know what I mean? You had it to start with. You know what I mean?
My people was a slave.
Exactly. Like that makes it 100 times better that I think I forget his name, is escaping me right now, but one of the senators in South Carolina was actually a slave and actually hijacked a Confederate ship and sailed all the way up into Union territory. I can't remember his name. I'm gonna kick myself.
Really?
Yes. Like you're doing, in my opinion, you're doing the youth a disservice by omitting these stories, right? Like that should be a movie. You know what I'm saying? The Nat Turner movie. People were like, oh, another slave movie. I'm like, it's about rebellion.
Totally different.
Yeah. I want to see that. I mean, of course, there's some pain and there's shame and things associated with, seeing a lot of the imagery. And I don't think it's healthy to subject yourself to too much of it. But I do feel like they have to know that, because I feel like that is what gets the young woman to know that, like, sexual ed is cool, but like,
How to be
there's
well.
all of this stuff, right? There's all of this stuff that we have gotten through, have triumphed through. And if they could do that, if they could come from little rags to holding seats in public spaces and offices and going to the outer space and all of this crazy stuff, and 100 years before 120 years before they were slaves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's 2 generations.
Yeah.
By average lifespan.
I think the challenge with some of us as black people is that history it can be used to free the minds. And sometimes I think we struggle with transitioning from like being confined and defined by it. as opposed to using it for opportunity to expand and build off on and like grow. It's like, okay, so yeah, this is what these other people did. How do I use that to connect these dots to take what it is that I want to do now exponentially higher, or just, you know, marginally, whatever it is, let me build off of it as opposed to just sit on what it is now,
Right.
and then be able to regurgitate facts about this person's life. And then you're like, no, you got to use it to bounce, to jump off to something higher, to something different, to something more relevant.
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
We teach our young men that if they can organize a bus boycott without social media,
What can you do?
and damn near bankrupt the city's
Yeah.
coffers, what could y'all do with one
could you do?
hashtag? You know what I mean? What could y'all do with one social media campaign that would be uplifting and building to the community?
There you go.
It might be the same thing, just in the digital space.
Yep.
It might be, you know, we ain't buying, you know, whatever no more because they don't value black people. It might be don't shop where you won't get hired. Looking at, we going through every corporation in America. If they don't got a black face in there, we boycotting them.
And that's where I think the thing where, like when the Bible says nothing new under the sun, you go back because somebody done been through this before. So check back and see what they did, update it, use new tools, new methods, because you have updated things now. So use those things, look and see how they did it, and then take the formula and freak it to get what you need or to help spread.
And it happened in 2020. These people were terrified.
Yeah.
Everybody had end racism and every other kind of slogan they could find because they were terrified of the financial ramifications of being seen as a dinosaur. The world is moving on without you. And so that potential exists, but having them learn where they come from and what their ancestors did and what they're capable of, and teaching them how to think critically about, like, you know, how do you apply that to today's time and space? It's powerful.
Thank you, bro, for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your love for our people. For doing your part, man.